Welcome to the TH Fantasy Football Show, hosted by Hestel and Ed.
With questionable QB choices last season, the Falcons continue to be very fantasy relevant, especially with a certain star at running back. So welcome into our fancy deep dive of the Atlanta Falcons, where we take a look at the Falcons for 2025 redraft leagues. And I'm joined by Meg, Boz_Meg on X, as we start off where the obvious place where we always start on these shows. We'll start with quarterback, and we'll start with Mr. Mike Penix. I've got open here. We just don't know enough yet. The one thing we do know is those 3 games, he completed 58% of his passes. It's about the only measure we've got, really. What are you expecting from this season from Penix?
I'm cautiously optimistic about Penix, to be honest. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. I think last season he not necessarily held back, but it wasn't his season. It was very much Cousins led, and I think that given the chance to have his own season where he is QB1, I see good things from him. I wouldn't shy away from drafting him, to be honest. I've got him as my backup in a couple of my fantasy.
I think that when we look at the numbers, so week 16, 7.38, week 17, 12.22, week 18, 25.98, we could say he was warming into it, but you're exactly right. Everything was geared around Cousins starting all last season. He wasn't taking starting reps in training camp, all of those other things that feed into it. For me, his fancy cap is partly we're not quite sure what we're going to get, but it's also that lack of rushing upside. So 265 yards in 6 years at college. We know we want it from our top kind of fancy quarterbacks. But I think you're right. If you've got him as your backup, I've got him here as a bye-week QB option, depending how you draft. If you're going for a later quarterback and you want that backup on your bench, you could do a lot worse than Penix, because at the point you're getting him, the upside is there that isn't there for other players, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think looking at the whole Falcon system, we're going into year 2 of the new system kind of bedding in, and I think that's going to make a big difference. There was a lot left over from Arthur Smith that needed to be worked out. The kinks needed to be worked out of that system, and I definitely think the newer system is geared towards MPJ doing really well.
And that won't be the first time we reference Mr. Arthur Smith in the show, I am sure. I do want to mention the backup QB in town. We said on our show, I think everyone was saying that the best case scenario for the Falcons last year is that at no point did they play their round 1 quarterback pick, because the money they paid for Kirk Cousins was going to pay off. I've got him on it because I guess really is a goodbye to Kirk Cousins for fancy relevance at this point. He would need, for me, a big trade to a perfect spot to interest me. But if Penix didn't do the business, would you have any interest in Cousins if he came back into the Falcons starting role?
I personally had so much hope for Cousins at the start of last season. Maybe didn't take into account enough the fact that he was coming off such a major injury the year before. I think every Falcons fan was probably as surprised as I was when we drafted Penix, to be honest, given that we just signed such a huge deal for Cousins. I think Cousins is done at the Falcons. I don't think there's any going back. And I think, there was pretty deep set damage done, especially when you've got top tier running backs, you've got decent wide receivers. You're looking at, players that you should be able to make plays with. And Cousins just couldn't. And I think, we saw glimmers of hope. We saw glimmers of that old Kirk Cousins Vikings era throughout, but not enough, I would say, to win the hearts and minds of fans during his first season. And there's just a lot of resentment because we're paying him, let's be honest, an awful lot of money to be sitting on our bench and, probably doing more there than he did all last season.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that for real life NFL, I think people have lost that hope now. I think from a fancy point of view, people have been burnt. He was never really offering you a huge amount. You had him in there hoping he was going to be a safe pair of hands to navigate you, especially in Superflex as your second QB. Yeah, I think this is possibly the last we will ever speak of Kirk Cousins from a fancy perspective. But the next gentleman up is someone that not only do I love to talk about, but I think we were talking about for several years to come. And I think could be talking about as the fantasy number one player overall this year. I've got a lot to say about Bijan, but we don't really need to say a huge amount. In my opinion, if you got the one-on-one, you take him, you move on. It is job done. But we shall talk about him a little bit nonetheless. It just feels so safe for fantasy. So over the last 2 seasons, 50% of all his games, he has been a top 12 running back, second only to Derrick Henry. Since 2007, only 2 running backs have had 17 plus fantasy points in 10 of the final 11 games. I know this is kind of clutching at straws to find a stat in there, but it sort of works. That was Robinson last year and CMC back in 2019. And then the numbers last year is just why it feels so safe from a workload point of view to me. 304 rush attempts, 72 targets. Can you ask for much more than that when you are aiming to take him? I've put on here his kind of ADP really is going in the first 4 picks. If he is still sat there at pick 4, you snap it up all day, every single day. It just feels really safe, and I'm really excited what happens. For me, he is the answer to the question, who could be the new running back 1 overall and potentially fancy player overall to take over from Saquon last year at running back.
Yeah, definitely. I think Bijan Robinson is the one to watch for us from the Falcons, has been for the last 2 years. He is world class. You look at that man playing and you just think he can make things happen for us. And maybe that's me being an overly optimistic Falcons fan, but I think generally speaking, I mean, I'm in about 25 fantasy leagues this year, and the ones that I've drafted so far, Bijan has not made it past the first 3 picks. And that speaks volumes in itself, because it's not Falcons fans that are picking him. It's whoever gets their hands on him. He went first in the draft that I'm part of today. He consistently shows up. He consistently puts those points up for you. And I think with someone like Bijan, his mindset, and I don't know if you follow him across social media or anything, but the way that he looks at life in general, his mindset is so positive and so inspirational. And I think he does that for people around him as well. You look at some of the younger players and you see Bijan really taking them under his wing and being that kind of role model for them as well, which, alongside obviously putting the points up and everything else like that, a true fan wants to see the locker room coherent and cohesive and working together. And I think he is a big, big part of that.
It's the intangibles like that make him such a nailed-on pick for Dynasty as well. I think that you look at, it reminds me of Derrick Henry in the fact that when you see that outlook, that attitude, that ethos, all of those things, that is why, yes, Derrick Henry is also an absolute genetic monster, but the way he approached everything is why he's still going the way he is now. And we could well be talking about Bijan from that point of view in 6 odd years as well. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And for me, if I got the opportunity to get him anywhere, if I'm drafting pick 1, I'm taking him. If I'm pick 2 or 3 and I get him, I'm over the moon that I've got a value pick already to start the draft. Looking behind him is what gives a bit of confidence in just how secure as well. Now, Tyler Rozier is not a shoddy backup running back by any stretch of the imagination. He's going to be good for maybe 2-3 properly fantasy relevant games this year. I think you just can never be quite confident when to start him. We had that year a couple of years ago where he seemed to get the goal line work that was obviously Bijan's, as Arthur Smith was just trying to annoy fantasy players, I am sure. But if Bijan misses time, he is a straight plug and play, and that's what makes him a bench stash option for me. I don't usually advocate for keeping players on the bench in case there's an injury, but we see it with running backs time in, time out, and the value of Algier could be fantastic there. In 54 games, though, Only 9.3 have been top 12 finishes. 25.9 have been top 24 finishes. That isn't bad return from someone you are getting that late. It is the inconsistency that over half his games have been outside the top 36, but that's why he's going off the board late 40s, early 50s. Do you think he can carve out a role on his own rights with Bijan in the system, or would you agree he's very much injury dependent at this point for fantasy relevance?
Yeah, I think with someone like Bijan in front of you, you're going to struggle anyway. You need to be more on it than ever before, and I'm not sure that Tyler Algier quite has that in him. If I'm being honest, I think, like you say, he's a good option for your fantasy bench. I wouldn't be jumping to pick him at any stage really, unless he's available maybe around 5, 6, and I'm thinking, right, I need to shore up my bench. I need to start looking at my options for, like you say, injury. I don't rate him, but I think we don't see a lot of him because of Bijan. I think you look at the options that are on the field, and even, and I know we'll probably speak about them, but even the likes of Darnell Mooney and things like that, they're outshining him, tenfold at this point at the end of last season. And like you said, I agree with you. I think a decent bench stash, maybe around 5, 6, but I wouldn't be running to pick him up, in all honesty, even as a Falcons fan.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with you on that. But he's a player that I think he could be a really nice value DFS pick if you're predicting a really run-heavy game at some point, possibly. It is predicting when those... He will have games, I'm sure of it. We'll have 2 or 3 where he gets over 15 points, but when to predict those is just too uncertain. Before we move on to wide receiver, please do take a moment to subscribe, give us a share as well. And once you finish this show, go and check out one of the other 31 deep dive shows we've got as we profile every single NFL team for Redraft Fantasy ready for 2025. I want to move on to wide receiver. I want to move on to Drake London now. And for the final time, I think I want to mention Arthur Smith, because it was confusing why Arthur Smith insisted that Drake London was best served being on the field for 75 to 80% of snaps quite frequently. Interesting enough, when he was on the field all the time, Drake London was quite a good wide receiver, and we saw that for fantasy. We saw 50 more targets, we saw 30 more receptions, we saw 7 more touchdowns. He's really came into where I want him. Wide receiver 5, finished on the season. Now, we've spoken on a few of the other deep dive shows. The number of injuries at wide receiver last year do mean that average points per game is a bit lower than we've seen previous years, but he was on the field. He still scored the 5th most points for wide receivers. The last 3 games with Penix are the ones that kind of interest me the most. Now, it's a very, very small sample, so I've said this already, but it was targeted 39 times. Even that, the only question mark I have over Drake London and whether I'm prepared to draft him at cost is Mike Penix. And I heard on another show I was listening to earlier on today, they summed it up perfectly. The fact that if Penix is Kirk Cousins or a little bit better, we are completely safe and confident with Drake London. And I think he will be. There is that world, though, where Penix isn't what we're hoping for and Drake London suffers. I feel fairly confident. It's that only 4 top 12 finishes is what worries me at cost. And we need to see a bit more of that. But I like Drake London to carry on this season. And I think, actually, if you can get him around that wide receiver 9, but he should return on that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that last season, the way that Kirk Cousins played did Drake London a bit dirty, to be honest. I think that he's better than what we saw last season. Again, might be an optimistic Falcons fan here, but I do think there is real class in the way that London plays. Do I think he's wide receiver 1? Possibly not after this year, I'll be honest. I think we need to be looking at that in a serious way, that, yes, your quarterback obviously is your main guy, but you need your offense to be as good better than if your quarterback's, not quite up to that standard. And I think Drake London kind of fell short of that for us last season. We all had high hopes. And actually, my outstanding player, now, I know I've already mentioned him, but my outstanding player was Darnell Mooney, because nobody expected that from Darnell Mooney. Nobody thought, he came from the Bears to us, was it last season? And you look at what he came on and did, despite the fact that he wasn't used to, and maybe it's because he wasn't used to the Arthur Smith system that was kind of bedded in. Maybe it's because of that. I'm not bitter towards Arthur Smith at all. But I thought Darnell Mooney outshone last season in a lot of the games, and I do feel like Mike Penix has a better connection with Darnell Mooney than Drake London. And again, maybe that's just those 3 games that we had PA leading, but I definitely think that if given the choice, I think he's one of my steals of the early rounds. Take Darnell Mooney over Drake London, in my opinion.
So we're on to Darnell Mooney now, and I was going to open it by asking for your opinion because I'm very biased towards Darnell Mooney. You say that no one predicted that. I took so much heat when we released our Falcons Deep Dive podcast this year because I said I didn't see a way that Darnell Mooney didn't comfortably repay on wide receiver 70 value because my answer to was Kyle Pitts going to have that leap and get those receptions was no, because I think Darnell Mooney will do that. And a couple of people relayed when I said he was going to be a solid flex play. No, not possible. Not going to happen. I think as a flex play goes, the value, I agree with you. I think he was a standout player for fantasy last year, considering where he was drafted. Yes, he had 6 games under 7.5 points, but that's what you get with a flex wide receiver that you're drafting that far down. But he had 8 games over 13 points, including 2 top 12 finishes. If you're getting any top 12 finishes in a season from a player in your flex spot, you're doing really, really well in my books. You say about Penix, he only had 12 targets in Penix's 3 starts, but was productive with them. So I think you're right. Maybe the system favoured funneling it to London, but you say that connection was there. I'm really interested to see Darnell Mooney this year. I think I've got written here that I was perhaps lower on him than I would have been previously because of what Penix will bring. But I suppose the counterpoint to that is what you're seeing kind of more closely as a Falcons fan, that you feel the connection could well be there and he will repay on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I've been watching, obviously, very closely one off season, watching the training camps, watching, the OTAs, and you can see there's just something about a connection between the two of them that works. And, hopefully that translates to the field in game time. And, we can hope and pray. But I like him. I like him a lot. I think a lot of last season, the offense suffered massively because they were coming on and making the moves and there was no defense backing them up. There was no pass rush and things like that. So I think it kind of got overshadowed a little bit by that lack of defense. And I think giving him the chance, looking at our defense going into this season, I think that Darnell Mooney is going to keep rising, and I think he's going to keep doing really well.
Also, we'll mention Ray McLeod. I don't see Ray McLeod having that fancy relevance for our redraft leagues, but as we'll mention, he's there injury dependent. He could be someone we consider on the waiver wire. I just don't see that happening myself. Something I don't see happening myself is, have we ever had a year 5 breakout from a promising player? I'm not sure we have. I don't know the answer to Kyle Pitts. So have you got any answers to help enlighten us on what we can expect from Kyle Pitts this season?
Kyle Pitts, the question that we all want to know the answer to. I think Kyle Pitts needs to find a new system. I'll be honest. I don't have anything personally against Kyle Pitts. I think that he could and has been a great player. And, we saw in his rookie season in year 1, we were looking for that real breakout season from him, and then just nothing. Now, last season, I know he was very frustrated with Kirk Cousins. I know that he just couldn't see how it was going to work moving forward. And I know that he was pressing behind the scenes, a lot of frustration at the fact we really should have started MPJ a lot sooner in the season than we did. I think he became very disillusioned by the coaching staff and the system and kind of lost faith in them a little bit. And we saw his play suffer for that. And then you look at the end of the season and you look at the Kyle Pitts that we got with MPJ. And whilst it wasn't a massive improvement, there were some improvements, we could say, in the way that he was playing and putting up points. I personally don't think that Atlanta is the right fit for Kyle Pitts. And I think we've been saying that since the start of last season. His heart just did not seem to be with us. I take copious notes during the Falcons games. I really zone in, watch it back, and a lot of my notes around Kyle Pitts was, where is he? Where am I looking? Because I'm not seeing that outstanding player that we've been promised, and I'm not seeing that breakthrough being made. And I think there has to come a point where, the management, the coaching staff this season, if he does not have an out of the ordinary good season, he's not going to be with us by the end of the season.
No, I think that's fair. And we've got him down as a phrase we coined last year for, I think Gabe Davis provoked it. He's a fantasy gremlin, because you don't know when to play him. When you trust him, nothing gets back. When you bench him, there's the big game. That's what I thought we'd, and you can never quite settle. I think that the thing's in his favour. He's still only 24. That is mad for a player that we've been speaking about for years now. Year one, 110 targets, and he was productive with them. I think it's the fact that last year, his fourth year, 74 targets. So I've got, has he just lost trust? But actually what you're saying maybe makes more sense. Has he just not got a place in that system where it's not working for him? He's currently injured. So obviously he's back at some point during training camp. Some point is one of those phrases you're never too happy about. I think I'm out. I don't see it changing. And I'll be honest, I'd not thought about the idea of that change of scene, but it's coming to year 4. Maybe that is on the horizon for him. Maybe that is what we need to kickstart him. I really hope we do, because we had so much promise. We could do with some fancy relevant tight ends to cheer on each week. And to have 12, ideally, to draft would be lovely, rather than the kind of 5 or 6 we feel we've got at the minute. So, yeah, I think we're ending on a disappointing note there with Kyle Pitts, but one that I'm sure we will talk about a lot through this season and beyond as well. What's your outlook for the Falcons this season, not just fantasy, but for real life NFL?
I have got them going 11-6 this season, very optimistically. But there's no reason why we can't. And, I think last season we did see those glimmers of hope. It came down to the last games of the season to decide the division. I think that we're quite lucky in a sense, the state of our division the way that it is right now, where the Saints are in a full rebuild. To be honest, they're not going to be doing anything exciting. The Panthers, I think, wants to watch, but I still think we can outplay them most days of the week. And as usual, the Buccaneers are our main competitors, but with an aging team across there, nobody's getting any younger. We've got quite a lot of fresh talent coming in to fix the holes that were in the team last season. So I'm cautiously optimistic. It would be nice if we could get that 11-6. Do I think realistically it's going to happen? We can live in hope, but I'm looking forward to watching them play this season, which is more than I can say last season. By week 2, I had become to the point where I thought, no, here we are, Falcons are back. Kirk Cousins, turns out it's not the solution to all of our problems. But yeah, I'm looking forward to watching them playing, and I think that there is some real good little gems in there for fantasy. And I think given some of our bench players from last season, some of our rookies from last season, your man Casey Washington, also Kadarrell Hodge out there, is outstanding. I hope we see more of them, and I hope that the Falcons can bring it home and really show the standard of talent that we've got, because we do have amazing talent there. It's put it all together now.
And I think that I'm more than happy to see the Falcons have a good season, as long as they don't make it Super Bowl and have to battle with the Ravens. That'll be the point I'll change my mind, because any good season for the Falcons means we're in for amazing fantasy production from Bijan, hopefully a solid season from Drayton as well. And who knows, maybe the fifth-year breakout from Kyle Pitts and a quarterback to lock into allies with Mike Penix as well. There's certainly lots to share, and that's what makes them so interesting, I think, coming into the season, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's just that kind of excited hope that we've all got now, isn't it? Before the season starts, we're all starting to get a little bit giddy. I don't know about you guys, but there's a game this month, that's an actual game. I mean, fair enough, it's pre-season, but we love to see that. And we're all starting to hype up our team and forget the wrongs of last season, and start looking towards what's to come, and hopefully for all of us a more positive season.
And everyone's a Super Bowl contender in July, aren't they? That's where the hope always lies. Well, thank you so much for joining, Meg. Where can people find you if they want to come and interact with you or view any of your content you're involved in?
Yeah, so that is social media. I'm ballers_Meg, and we've also just launched our new Brit Ball the podcast will be launching our platform covering all things Brit Ball, which is the Brit Ballers on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or X rather, I should say, and TikTok as well. So all the good platforms, the Brit Ballers and ballers_Meg.
Amazing. So please do make sure you go and check that out. We'll post some of the links in the comments down below as well. So once you finish this, please go and also check out one of the 31 other deep dive shows, and then stay on board for the regular season as well, where we have lots of exciting new content coming your way. But for now, that is all from me. It is all from Meg. So Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.